Relentless violence for 22 minutes. Does it sound short? Maybe, by our usual standards, but we have to admit that Issa Genza is a powerful hardcore beatdown that, if repeated for much longer, could leave irreversible damage. When we say hardcore, we mean the old-fashioned kind that was especially violent and corrosive, like Black Flag and Minor Threat, to name but a few. Curiously, it also has the ability to sink into your skin like the classics, and in the end you may even change your mind. You might think that despite the risk of irreversible damage, in the end it really doesn't matter.
Terminalist's second album, after an excellent debut in 2021 with The Great Acceleration. Expectations were high and they don't disappoint. The Crisis as Condition brings us that winning blend of thrash metal and black metal, with the former speaking louder. Power, a relentless tempo and a vociferous voice over great riffs. This is literally the formula for happiness for any self-respecting metalhead. The Danish band doesn't go much further than on their debut, but given that they thrash like nobody's business, all that was required was some great head-banging riffs, and that's exactly what we end up with here, which is perfect.
Despite only being a band formed in 2020, Timechild present themselves as a veteran band who know very well what they want and how to get there. A mix of hard rock and progressive sensibilities that results in a fantastic follow-up to their 2021 debut album, and yet it moves. The verve and melody they present make you wonder how heavy music has the capacity to stand the test of time. Far from being a portrait of the past, but also without being a reflection of modern heavy music, Timechild continue their journey with a lot of class, which is reflected in a second album of great quality.
There are a lot of facts about this album and this band that make us fans straight away. Firstly, it's a band that emerged in the first half of the 90s. Secondly, their aim from the outset was to create a trilogy based on the progressive rock of the 60s and 70s, with a close connection to folk, in other words, the more Scandinavian side of things. Thirdly, this first book is the first part of the trilogy. I read somewhere that this album is a modern incarnation of a mix between Jethro Tull and Yes, and that makes perfect sense. Musically, it has the finesse of Yes as well as that very Jethro Tull charm, and overall it has the look and feel of a classic album without sounding dated or too nostalgic. Progressive rock ages in this way, without sounding old and always with timeless class.
The ninth album of originals by Spanish black metal band Dantalion, always an imposing mark and representative of the level of work the band has tirelessly shown. Of course, quantity doesn't always mean quality, but in this case, Fatum has everything it takes to be one of their most accomplished and enlightened works. Black metal with melodic undertones that make it melodic and memorable, without any approximation to anything outside the boundaries of the style. The Scandinavian references are here, but even for those who don't see this form of black metal as the truest, there's no denying that there's a passion and dedication to the style that you don't often find. A passion that is brightened by inspiration that manages to captivate those looking for feelings of anger, despair, rebellion, and melancholy, all combined in one of their most dynamic works.
The second album from this band that continues to impress in the extreme music underground. Putting melody, heaviness and melancholy all in the same pot and stirring it well is nothing new. However, what Tideless do is add tons of atmosphere to their music without being afraid to add layers of experimentalism to it. And without taking the musical identity too far away from the original premise. The band refers to their sound as shoegazing death metal, which makes sense, although in our opinion, what they show is atmospheric death/doom metal that keeps the listener hooked for over 70 minutes without even showing the slightest sign of boredom. Of course, that's what being a doom metal fan is all about. But even if you're not pure doomers, you just have to have a taste for the feeling of ambience and atmosphere in the music and appreciate the way it evolves beyond the usual conformity of music ready to be consumed after coming off the assembly line, and you'll be able to fully appreciate this work of art.
They're back. Is it possible for a band to gather as much consensus as Cannibal Corpse? Of course, there will always be those who only like the Chris Barnes era. But given that George Corpsegrinder Fisher has been at the microphone for the legendary band since 1995, almost 30 years ago, that kind of argument simply doesn't make sense anymore. And helping that argument is the fact that the band hasn't released a bad album since. I could even say that they've never released a bad album in their entire career, but you know what I mean. Chaos Horrifics is the second with Eric Rutan, who not only takes over the guitars again, but is also the band's producer, maintaining the powerful raw sound that is already a trademark of what the band does. Without being absolutely technical, like some of their previous work, especially from the Pat O'Brien era, or repeating what they had already done with Violence Unimagined. This is an album that gives deep pleasure to anyone who likes violent and powerful death metal, a class that is only improving with age.
The beauty of this work is impressive, something you'd expect from the Norwegian Spurv. After all, we've been spoiled with each of their releases with unbeatable quality in post-rock. A quality that has expanded more and more over the years and over 3 albums. This fourth one doesn't change the premise at all, but presents songs that go even further, reach deeper emotional pinnacles and bring a more cinematic viscerality to the listener. Even those who may be somewhat tired of the way post-rock always follows the same rules will be surrendered to the beauty with which this work speaks to the heart. A must.
The press release warns us right away. There is no refuge. Despite the short duration, not even 20 minutes while it lasts, what we have is a punishment like we haven't had for a long time. The technical side is very refined and the foot is always on the pedal. The beginning with Silk Ash Cascade might even lead you astray because of the infectious melody, but make no mistake. This is a grindcore album with no pause for breath, and yet far from being one-dimensional. One of those albums you can hardly get enough of. Rumor has it that it also comes with the instrumental version of each of these songs, which should be just as interesting, but which we haven't had access to. Without a doubt, the grind addiction of 2023.
Primordial's return was one of the most eagerly awaited here at World of Metal. The 5 years that separate this How It Ends from the previous exile amongst the ruins felt like twice as long, but we are aware that a new album from the Irish band is not a task that should be taken lightly to satisfy the consumerist desires of a market or avid fans. Fortunately, we feel that this new album is precisely what we wanted, another masterpiece with a concept that tells us about the ability to resist, to fight for freedom, liberation from what oppresses us. Not only in a historical context, but also in a contemporary one, of going against the current, of challenging the authority that oppresses us. Musically, he manages to capture the essence of this feeling perfectly in a long album, but one that is impossible to resist the temptation to play on repeat. From start to finish, this is yet another unique piece of work from a band that has already accustomed us to nothing less.